going to be the final presentation, and it's going to culminate, not accumulate, culminate in an art contest that has been internationally brought up. And my friend Roy Laird, who's been around Go almost as long as Terry, not quite, maybe a year or two, is going to bring on a panel of Roy and Paul and Peter and Sid. And here we go. Okay. I'm going to put this down because I actually have a mic. So, we're here with a very practical purpose. We want to give you information that you can use to bring Go into your community. And we want to inspire you to do that. This panel consists of me, Roy Laird, Paul Barchelon, who is the Vice President of the American Go Foundation, Peter Friedman, who is a longtime Go organizer in the Portland area and has worked extensively in schools, and Siddhartha Avila from Mexico, who teaches Go in a school program that's an arts program. And he's going to talk to us about how Go fits into an arts curriculum. So the title of our presentation collectively is How and Why to Bring Go into Your Community. And we're hoping that you already understand the reasons why you should bring Go into your community, especially the people here in the audience. But when it comes time that you want to talk to a principal at your local school or your local librarian about starting a program, well, we live in an evidence-based age. And the principal and the librarian are going to need some convincing. So I'm going to start by going quickly through some of the why you should do this, and why Go is an important part, or can be an important part of a child's development. And then these fellows are going to talk about how to do it in libraries with the support of the American Go Foundation, in schools, and as part of an arts curriculum. So can we bring up my PowerPoint? Play, Go, and Grow is the title of my presentation, and I just want to mention that I maintain a page under that name on the American Go Foundation website. If you Google Play, Go, and Grow, you'll find it. I hope you can find me. And if you have other information or comments for what's on that page, it's very much a work in progress, and I'm always interested in updating and expanding it. So, Play, Go, and Grow, why every school and library should have a Go program. And I want to start by making the obvious point, obvious to us here, that Go is more than a game. Go is more than just a way to kill time. It's more than just something you can win over the other guy. It can be an important part of your life. And to illustrate that, I wanted to start by sharing with you one of my favorite and most precious possessions, which is the scroll that you see pictured there. A friend of mine that's a Go-playing friend was traveling in China many years ago. I hate to think how many. And he saw a calligrapher in a town square doing these scrolls. And you know, the Chinese have a tradition of expressing things, aphorisms, proverbs, in 4 characters. So he said to the guy, I have a friend back in the United States, and we play Go together, and can you do me a scroll about that? So this is what the calligrapher came up with. And the 4 characters basically say, play, go, make friends. The second character there, with the 2 side by side, is the ancient way that the Chinese people wrote Wei Qi thousands of years ago. If Confucius wrote about Go, and we think that he did, when he wrote the word Wei Qi, that's how he wrote it. And you know, many Chinese characters have their origins in a fairly literal description of something. So the character on the left is intended to represent a tree. The character on the right is a stone temple. And so it represents the wood and stone that are the essential elements in the game. The third character, I'm told, says something like enrich, ripen, steep, make in the sense that you make something over time and it becomes fuller and richer. And then the final character at the bottom there, which you can barely see, I'm sorry about that. To me, if Picasso or Keith Haring had wanted to do 2 or 3 lines to express friendship, they couldn't have done a better job than that character that seems to be 2 people dancing joyfully together. So the scroll says, play, go, make friends. And the annotation along the right there says, when you play go with your friend, your go gets stronger and your friendship gets stronger. So go is a very important part of my life and of many of the people here, and can become an enriching part of everyone's life. Now let's see if this works. All right. So just to re-hit a theme that's been coming up throughout the symposium, when children play, they're not just playing around. They're doing serious work. They're learning through play. Nolan Bushnell spoke about this in the keynote address, and some other folks also. They're learning motor skills if they're doing sports play. They're practicing social roles that they've seen the adults around them do in fantasy play. They're competing with each other in competitive play, and that, of course, is where we come in. I was going to talk a lot more about play in general. It's my field. But I'm going to skip through that just to get to some of the essence of this and leave room for everyone else to speak. But I think we all know that there's good play and bad play. Every parent gives some thought, or nearly every parent, I think, gives some thought to which video games your children play and how long, and what activities they engage in and what activities they don't. So there are ways of play that are not helpful to development, and there are ways of play that are helpful, and Go is one of the most helpful. It can become a support to other ways of learning. Nolan Bushnell talked about schema, how if you have one framework in your mind and you're emotionally invested in that framework, then you can use that framework to assimilate other types of learning. So it supports other types of learning, and it also can make learning relevant. Children who are playing Go and enjoying Go, as we saw in Mark Moskowitz's film, are learning mathematics. Even 5- and 6-year-olds are learning addition and subtraction. If they're adding up their territory and it's 4 lines by 5 lines, 4 times 5 is 20, oh, that's why the teacher wants me to memorize these stupid times tables. There are so many ways that it can work. And of course, Go is important throughout the lifespan. Play is important throughout the lifespan. And competitive play, mind sports, are becoming more and more recognized as beneficial for children. A few years ago, the US Mind Sports Association was formed, and just earlier this year, they had a symposium at Harvard University, and they're in the process of developing an online toolbox that can be used in the classroom and integrated into the school day, where children would learn to play strategic games, chess, Go, and some of the other enrolled mind sports, and that this would become a support for their learning. Also, just a few months ago, the European Parliament officially endorsed putting chess in schools with Declaration 50 of 2011, where they specifically called on schools throughout the European Union to introduce a program called Chess in Schools, which is a program that was developed by Garry Kasparov. And they're going to ensure sufficient funding that this would actually occur. So chess in particular has made a lot of inroads, and when you think about games and the value of education, very often it is chess that comes to mind. They've done a lot of research over the years, and I would just like to take a little side road into what some of the chess people have learned. If you go to the US Chess Federation website, you will see a list of these. Oh, that's an interesting bullet there. Not the one I put, but that's fine. You'll see a list of these skills that children are working on when they're learning chess: focusing, visualizing, thinking ahead, weighing options, analyzing, thinking abstractly, planning, juggling priorities. And if you were in the US Open this morning, I think probably you used most of those skills, and you will tomorrow morning as well. This PowerPoint, by the way, is also available for download from my webpage. And the red text, for example, down at the bottom there, if you download the PowerPoint and click on that, it'll take you to the actual website where all of this is listed. In New York City, where I come from, we have an organization called Chess in the Schools that's kind of the acme, the epitome, the high point of what can be done with chess. It's New York City based. It's a $3.3 million budget. In 2010, they taught 13,000 kids in 51 public schools with weekly lessons. They did after-school programs, teacher training. They also support enriched chess programs. And there was an article in the New York Times on April 27th about an intermediate school in Brooklyn, in a deprived area where 4 out of 5 children qualify for free lunch, where chess is a part of the entire culture. And with the support of the Chess in the Schools, they've been able to do that. And this school's junior high school team this year won the National High School Championship, which just goes to show what kids can do when they put their mind to it and when enthusiasm meets opportunity and resources. Chess in the Schools actually conducted a study of some of the students that they're working with and comparing them with other students with comparable socioeconomic status but who did not play chess. And they have some pretty good data that shows that the kids actually score higher on standardized tests, get higher grades, attend school more regularly, resolve their conflicts more peacefully, and create lasting friendships like the type that I described as we opened this talk. So without a doubt, chess is an important support to learning for any child that learns chess. And chess does have one thing that Go does not, and that is cultural penetration. Everybody knows chess. Most people learn the rules. Lots of people play. I live on 106th and Broadway in New York City. When I come out of my building in the morning and walk to the corner, there's this kind of crazy guy sitting there. He's a bookseller. He's got a tray of books. And next to it, he's got 2 chessboards. And at any time, you'll see him there playing chess with one of his buddies, or with a kid that came by. Sometimes other people are there. So I don't even have to cross the street to see somebody playing chess. And I dream of the day when that'll be true of Go also. So what I want to do with the remainder of my talk is to talk about what I think are 4 specific advantages that Go offers to the student learner, more powerful, more effective, even than chess. So any teacher or librarian that already buys into that chess is useful, these are aspects that probably most of you are familiar with that we can also point out. The handicapping system, the massive depth of cultural and historical connection, an aspect of the game that I'm going to refer to as progressive complexity, and the fact that it speaks to the challenges of life in a modern way, modern life in a special way, and I'm going to explain a little more about that. The ranking system we all know about. Everybody in the room has a rank, similar to golf, as Terry Benson just mentioned. It's inherent in the game structure. There are other games. Chess, you can play chess without a bishop, without a rook. You can start a game with less pieces. But the handicapping system is really a natural, intrinsic part of Go and flows so that there's much more opportunity for 2 players of unequal rank to have an equally challenging contest together. And all serious players know what their rank is. And if you're an honest Go player, you know that through the course of your life, you're going to win about half your games. You're going to lose about half your games. Chess players, checkers players, other players don't really know that. They really want to win every game. But we can set our rank, and what we're really doing, we're not so much competing with the person across the board as we're competing with ourselves. We're trying to develop our own skill. And that's a very different, I think it affects the culture of Go in some very profound ways. So now, cultural and historical links, there are so many ways that schools can tie curriculum items to Go, where a child who's interested in Go might become more interested in certain aspects of Japanese or Chinese history. Or, as I mentioned, math is a big area where Go can teach children addition, multiplication. One thing it shares with chess is that you can learn to read coordinates on a graph by looking at Go records. There's such an interesting thing about Go with the balance of forces. Stones together are powerful but tight. Stones apart are efficient but looser and not so tight. There's almost, I wonder if somewhere out there there's a brilliant mathematician that could express that sort of thing in an equation. But math links to the arts that Sid's going to talk about. Some of you who are educators may be familiar with something called the STEM curriculum, which is science, technology, education, and math, that's being very widely promulgated throughout the educational establishment in the United States. And there's a woman in Georgia who has developed a module to add into that. She calls it STEAM, Science, Technology, Education, Arts, and Math. And the art that she's interested in is Go. And again, if you download the PowerPoint, you can click on STEAM and you'll get to a PowerPoint about her presentation. Now, progressive complexity. Chess, let's acknowledge, chess is plenty complex enough for most human brains, probably for all human brains. But for the record, Go is much, much more complicated than chess by several orders of magnitude because the board is 5 times the size of a chessboard and because all moves are actually possible. At the beginning of a chess game, only 10 moves are possible. At the beginning of a Go game, 361 are possible. And as pieces appear on the board, the game becomes more complicated, whereas in chess, in checkers, in other games, as pieces disappear, the game simplifies. It was reported in Omni magazine more than 20 years ago. Somebody figured out that it's actually 10 to the 761st power number of possible Go games, which is way, way more than the number of subatomic particles in the universe. Each game also becomes a record of itself. You play a move, you have to live with that move for the rest of the game. At the end of the game, you can see where you went wrong, which is a nice advantage. Go always has a decisive result. There are no stalemates. There are no draws. So that's some other ways in which Go is a very appreciable and pastime. Now, the question of Go as an expression of modern life. I want to go cosmic on you for a bit and talk about 3 questions that are really the 3 questions that philosophers have been thinking about since there was a discipline of philosophy. What is my relationship to the world that I live in and the universe? That's one question. Are there forces beyond my control? Fate versus free will, that whole area of inquiry. Second question is, what is my relationship to my fellow man? How do I resolve conflicts? How do I live with other people in the world? And the third question is, who am I? What are my values? What are my skills? What are my strengths? And how can I become a better person? So now we come to my fancy slide. If I asked you to name 3 classic games that have survived the test of time, that have been played for thousands of years, and are played by millions of people even today. I think I can probably guess the three that you would name, which is backgammon, chess, and Go. Now, if we look at backgammon, backgammon is a game that seems to sort of represent the first question, man versus fate, because of the dice, the doubling cube, there's chance in there, there's really, it's how do I cope with forces that are beyond my control. Backgammon is not really a game of perfect information because you don't know what the dice are going to say next. If we look at chess, chess very clearly represents man versus man, and really in a kind of a medieval way where the troops line up like British redcoats or whatever, hierarchical. Each piece has its role that is defined by the rules of the game. And chess is a game of total victory. There was an article in Smithsonian Magazine, a really funny article like 20 years ago, called The Opponent Must Be Destroyed. And it was a history of chess and some of the legendary conflicts that are in there. If you look it up on the Smithsonian website, you'll get a kick out of it. And Go, as I was explaining with the handicapping system, represents man versus self. To quote or paraphrase the Declaration of Independence, all pieces are created equal. The power of each individual piece is not arbitrarily assigned to it. It derives its power from its relationships with others. And victory is a calibrated kind of thing. It's 1 point, 10 points, more. Each game has a wider variety of victories. Now, there's another way that we could look at this also. Anthropologists often look at history in terms of stages of development. There's the hunter-gatherer phase in early caveman life where we were basically running around trying to kill dinosaurs and trying to avoid being eaten. And we really avoided each other. Man did not, there was no percentage in running into another tribe. You just basically wanted to find the place where the other tribes hadn't gotten all the food yet. So that's the man versus fate era. Then we have the shepherd-nomad, the farmer-peasant phase of human history, the last couple thousands of years, where people began to have herds of cattle to settle farmland, and then the idea became, gee, you have a really nice farm over there. I think I'm going to come over and take it. So the man versus man conflict emerged. But with the emergence of industrial society in the 19th century and 20th century, another paradigm arises of how life could be on Earth, possibly a post-war world, where if you have a factory that makes bicycles and I have a factory that makes cars, I don't necessarily want to come take your factory away from you. I want you to make better bicycles. And I want to make better cars so that I'll sell you my cars, you'll sell me your bicycles, and we trade together. We cooperate while also competing. Does that sound like a game that you're familiar with? It sounds like Go to me. So that's why I say that Go speaks to the challenges of modern life in a special way that we don't find in many other games. I have a wonderful quote on this subject, and I want to credit William Pinkard, who was a Go historian and art collector in the 20th century, and I'm just going to read this off. That we have these three games shows that they answer basic needs in the human spirit. People everywhere are preoccupied with social structure, positions, and status. Chess, of course. And everyone capable of reflection must sometimes speculate on his private relationship to fortune and fate. But Go is the one game which turns all preoccupations and speculations back on their source. It says, in effect, that everyone starts out equal, and that what happens thereafter is not fate, it's not social position, it is only the quality of your own mind. It's a paradigm for our time. There's a great TED Talk by Frank Lantz, who's one of the vice presidents of Zynga that does the social games on Facebook and stuff, and he's into reinventing games in a more cooperative atmosphere. It's called Go, Poker, and the Sublime, and if you find it, you'll enjoy watching it. He loves to reflect on the complex, paradoxical nature of the game. He talks about how a thick position is good and a thin position is bad. But a light position is good and a heavy position is bad. How does that make sense? It's paradoxical. And I'm also fascinated by the fact that here we have a game that people around the world cannot agree on what to call it. They can't agree on the rules. There are at least 6 different sets of rules. So nobody knows the rules, but everybody knows how to play. It's just, you know, one of those postmodern paradoxes that Go is so good at emulating. And it has that calibrated relative result. It's a game of construction rather than tearing down. And Mr. Pinkard again says, with its freedom from complicated rules, its simplicity of form, its fluidity and spaciousness, it comes remarkably close to becoming an ideal mirror for reflecting the basic processes of mentation. In other words, no artificial, arbitrary conventions. It is strictly mind versus mind. So now I want to wrap up my end of things with talking about 3 studies that have been done in the last 5 or 10 years having to do with Go. And the first one was done by Baromi Kim at Kyunghee University. And she took a group of 68 5-year-olds in Seoul, Korea, and divided them into 2 groups. Half of them learned Go, and half of them didn't. She tested them and retested them on the most common test of intelligence in younger children, which has a fairly wide margin of error, and maybe that's why they call it the whoopsie. But she used that test, and she found that both groups did make gains, but as you can see by looking at her results, the players are in black, the non-players are in green, and if you look over to the right on the change bar, in the intelligence measure, 15.7 gained versus 9.8. That's percentage points over the school year. Concentration, they became 157% more able to concentrate. Part of that is maturation. It's not just, and non-players also gained. But I'll leave it to you to look at these in more detail if you want to download the PowerPoint. But that's one piece of compelling evidence that children with Go on board develop better, further, than those without. The second study I want to talk about comes from Zhangchuan Chen at the University of Science and Technology in China. And he used functional magnetic resonance imaging. You know, MRIs is that thing they put you in the tube and put you through. They have a way of doing that now where you can actually be doing something and they're measuring what's going on in your brain. So these guys did functional MRIs on people as they played Go. And they compared their results to an identical study that had been done by another team of people who played chess. The chess players, it was discovered, had all kinds of activity lighting up, especially in the left hemisphere, which is associated with rational thought. But Dr. Chen et al. Discovered that there was that level of activation in the left hemisphere, but the right hemisphere was also activated. So Go actually exercises more of the brain than other more rationalistic pursuit type of games. And the last study I want to talk about, which is really the most kind of mind-blowing to me, by B. Lee and his associates in Seoul, they used something called diffusion tensor imaging to take pictures of people's brains and a procedure called voxel-based analysis to figure out what's going on in the people's brains. And they compared experienced Go players to non-players, and they think they found actual physical differences in their brains, where the people who played Go had larger amounts of what they call white matter, which, as you see here, is associated with attention, memory, executive function, and problem solving. They found that the Baduk experts tended to develop a task-specific template, that schema that Bushnell was talking about, and they were less likely to use structures related to load-dependent memory capacity. What does that mean? What that means is when your opponent plays a move, the instant it hits the board, and the players in the audience will recognize this, within a second, there are 3 or 4 moves that appear to you. You're thinking of possibilities right away. You don't start doing analysis and say, oh, that's one possibility. This analysis leads to another one. You instantly know certain possibilities, and then you check out each possibility and you choose the best one. So experienced players have this template, and it fires off, and it seems to actually bring about changes in the brain. And these guys thought that understanding these changes might be helpful for improving higher order cognitive capacities such as learning, abstract reasoning, and self-control. So Go in the classroom could, obviously, if these guys are right, be a very valuable tool. So in conclusion, mind sports of all kinds are a very important medium for growth, development, and important social interaction. And by its fundamental nature, Go is an unsurpassed mind sport arena with several unique and valuable qualities for human growth and development. And so that's why I say that every community should have a Go program. And that's the end of my presentation.